History is often explained through timing. Too early, and the world is not ready. Too late, and the moment has passed. This idea is comforting because it suggests that failure is temporary and success is simply a matter of waiting for the right moment. Gold, more than any other resource, became the symbol of this belief. Find it at the right time, and cities appear. Find it at the right time, and fortunes are made. Find it at the right time, and history changes direction. But what if that belief is wrong? What if gold is discovered at the perfect moment, when prices are high, demand is real, technology is available, and experience already exists, and still, nothing happens? This story is not about legends or speculation. It is about real gold discoveries that appeared under conditions that looked almost ideal, and yet failed to reshape anything. Not because the gold wasn't there, not because people didn't notice, but because timing alone was never enough. Before we continue, if you're interested in real stories about gold, missed opportunities, and decisions that quietly shaped history, this channel focuses on documented events, not myths. These are not tales of adventure. They are records of moments when logic said yes, but reality said nothing at all. By the end of the 19th century, gold had already proven its power. It was no longer a rumor or a dream. It was infrastructure. Entire monetary systems were tied to it. Banks measured stability through it. Governments planned around it. This was not the chaotic age of early prospectors with plans and guesses. It was the age of surveys, geological reports, and financial projections. Railroads had reached deep into remote regions. Mining technology had matured. Capital was organized and mobile. If gold was discovered during this period, history suggests it usually mattered. That assumption became the foundation of expectation. People believed that discovery itself carried momentum, that once gold appeared, development would naturally follow. But the historical record tells a quieter story. During this same period, several gold deposits were identified under conditions that seemed almost ideal. The timing was right, the demand was real, the market existed, and yet no rush followed. No towns emerged. No lasting wealth was created. The moment that should have mattered didn't. The gold discoveries at the center of this story were not accidents, rumors, or misunderstandings. They did not come from hopeful prospectors guessing their way through the wilderness. They came from surveys, measurements, and official documentation. By the late 19th century, geology had become a professional discipline. Governments employed surveyors. Private companies hired trained specialists. Mining decisions were no longer driven by instinct, but by data. In several regions, geological teams identified gold-bearing formations that met every basic requirement for commercial interest. Samples were collected. Assays were performed. Reports were filed. According to historical records, the purity of the ore was confirmed independently, sometimes multiple times. There was no disagreement about whether gold existed underground. In some cases, the deposits were discovered during routine geological mapping, not active prospecting. The gold revealed itself quietly, almost incidentally, as part of broader studies focused on land use, mineral classification, or infrastructure planning. These were not spectacular finds, no shining nuggets, no dramatic announcements, but they were credible, and credibility mattered far more than excitement. The locations were known. The estimated volumes were calculated. Extraction methods were technically feasible. On paper, everything pointed toward development. Yet almost immediately, hesitation followed discovery. Not doubt about the gold itself, but doubt about what the gold could actually do. Investors reviewed the reports. Officials reviewed the claims. Engineers reviewed the terrain. And instead of urgency, the response was caution. Gold had been found, clearly, verifiably, undeniably. But the discovery did not trigger movement. It triggered analysis. And analysis slowed everything down. This was the first sign that something fundamental had changed. In earlier eras, discovery created momentum automatically. Now, discovery created questions. We often treat timing as the decisive factor in historical success. The assumption is simple: find the right resource at the right moment, and the rest follows naturally. Gold reinforced this belief more than any other material. Entire narratives of progress were built around it. Gold rushes, boomtowns, sudden wealth, rapid expansion. But those stories hide a critical truth. Timing is not a single condition. It is a fragile balance of multiple systems operating simultaneously. High gold prices do not guarantee investment. Demand does not guarantee access. Technology does not guarantee profitability. Later historical analysis suggests that what we call perfect timing is often just a coincidence of visibility, not viability. In the cases examined here, timing appeared perfect on the surface. Markets valued gold highly. Currencies depended on it. Extraction technology existed. But beneath that surface, the systems that once amplified discovery had begun to resist it. Legal frameworks had grown more complex. Economic calculations had become stricter. Political priorities had shifted. Gold was no longer enough to override friction. What once triggered rapid expansion now required approval, justification, and long-term guarantees. Timing didn't fail. It revealed its limits. These discoveries occurred at the exact moment when gold was transitioning from an engine of growth into a regulated asset, still valuable, still important, but no longer capable of forcing action on its own. The illusion was not that timing was wrong. The illusion was believing that timing alone ever controlled outcomes. One of the most underestimated barriers facing these discoveries was not geology, technology, or timing. It was lore. By the time many of these gold deposits were identified, the legal environment surrounding land and resources had changed dramatically compared to earlier gold rush eras. In the mid-19th century, discovery often came first, and lore followed later. By the late 19th and early 20th century, the order had reversed. Land was already classified. Jurisdictions overlapped. Ownership was layered and conditional. Gold was increasingly found on land controlled by federal authorities, state governments, private interests, rail companies, or protected territories. In some cases, multiple claims existed simultaneously, each valid in a different legal sense. Filing a mining claim no longer meant immediate access. Permits were required. Environmental and safety standards had to be met. Water rights needed negotiation. Transportation corridors demanded approval. According to later legal analysis of mining regions, many projects stalled not because permits were denied outright, but because they became trapped in procedural delay. Months turned into years. Costs accumulated before extraction even began. In some regions, the discovery of gold triggered legal re-evaluation of the land itself. Once value was confirmed, restrictions increased rather than decreased. Government sought oversight. Agencies sought control. Regulations multiplied. Gold, paradoxically, made access harder. The result was a form of ownership without agency. Geologists could identify deposits. Companies could document value, but no one could move decisively. Earlier gold rushes thrived on speed. These discoveries faced bureaucracy, and bureaucracy does not respond to timing. It responds to coercion. The gold was real, but legally distant. Even when legal access was theoretically possible, economics delivered the next constraint. Gold had not become less valuable, but extraction had become more expensive. Many of these deposits were located in regions that looked accessible on maps, but proved costly in reality. Remote distances increased transportation expenses. Rugged terrain demanded specialized equipment. Limited water supply restricted processing options. Infrastructure, once built reactively around gold rushes, now required upfront investment. Rail lines were no longer guaranteed. Road construction required approval and capital. Temporary camps were replaced by regulated operations with permanent costs. When financial projections were prepared, optimism faded quickly. Gold prices looked strong until adjusted for labor, transport, equipment depreciation, legal compliance, and risk. Margins narrowed, then disappeared. Investors were not afraid of gold. They were afraid of loss. Historical financial records show that in multiple cases, mining companies chose not to proceed even after confirming viable deposits, not because extraction was impossible, but because it was uncompetitive. Other industries offered better returns with lower uncertainty. Steel, manufacturing, energy. Gold no longer stood alone at the top of the economic hierarchy. The excitement that once followed discovery was replaced by calculation, and calculation does not rush. Gold existed, but it did not justify urgency. The market had learned restraint. By the time these gold discoveries were confirmed, the political meaning of gold had quietly changed. Gold was still valuable, but it was no longer decisive. In earlier periods, gold functioned as an emergency resource. It financed wars, stabilized fragile governments, and attracted rapid settlement to contested regions. By the late 19th and early 20th century, states had learned to operate without constant reliance on new gold inflows. Industrial capacity mattered more. Control of transportation mattered more. Energy resources mattered more. Gold became part of the system, not the engine of it. This shift had consequences. When new gold deposits were discovered, governments no longer reacted with urgency. They did not rush to enable extraction. They did not restructure priorities to accommodate it. In many cases, authorities remained neutral. They neither blocked development nor actively supported it. Neutrality, however, is not absence of power. Without state support, infrastructure stalled. Without strategic interest, funding dried up. Without political urgency, delays became permanent. In some regions, land containing gold was considered more valuable for reasons unrelated to mining. Military planning, transportation corridors, future urban development, environmental preservation. Gold was weighed against competing long-term interests and often lost. According to later policy reviews, several mining proposals failed not because they were rejected, but because they never aligned with broader state goals. Gold no longer justified disruption. It was tolerated, not prioritized. This was a critical change from earlier eras, when discovery itself forced political action. Now, discovery required justification, and justification required alignment with national strategy. Gold alone could not provide that anymore. Despite these constraints, belief did not disappear. Geologists trusted the data. Engineers trusted the feasibility. Local communities trusted history. They had seen what gold had done before. Boomtowns had risen from nothing. Jobs had appeared overnight. Entire regions had transformed. Expectation was not irrational, it was historical. Small investors followed reports closely. Local newspapers speculated carefully. Land values rose modestly in anticipation. But this was a quieter optimism. No mass migration, no sudden rush. People waited for confirmation from institutions, banks, governments, major firms. That confirmation never arrived. The disappointment that followed was not dramatic. There were no riots, no mass departures, no collapse of public trust. Instead, hope eroded slowly. Projects were postponed. Meetings were delayed. Announcements stopped. Communities adjusted their expectations downward year by year. Some residents left. Others stayed, waiting for a revival that never came. The gold did not disappear. The belief in its transformative power did. For many, the lesson was subtle but lasting. Discovery does not guarantee destiny, and history does not repeat itself on demand. One of the most misleading aspects of these gold discoveries is how their failure appeared, or rather, how it didn't. There was no single moment when everything collapsed. No dramatic announcement, no public admission of defeat, no clear line between success and failure. Instead, the projects faded. After the initial surveys and reports, feasibility studies were commissioned. Those studies led to revisions. Revisions led to delays. Funding rounds were postponed. Partnerships were reconsidered. Timelines were extended indefinitely. Nothing went wrong in a spectacular way, and that was the problem. Gold projects of earlier eras failed loudly through accidents, shortages, or conflict. These projects failed quietly through inactivity. According to historical financial records, several proposed mining operations were never formally cancelled. They were simply never completed. The paperwork remained. The claim stayed filed. The gold stayed underground. From the outside, it looked like patience. From the inside, it was paralysis. Companies waited for better conditions. Governments waited for clearer incentives. Communities waited for decisions. Everyone waited. And waiting became the final state. Years passed. Markets shifted. Priorities changed again. By the time interest briefly returned, the moment had already dissolved. No one could point to a single mistake. There was no villain, no bad actor, no obvious error. History did not reject these discoveries. It absorbed them and moved on. What makes these stories more than historical curiosities is how familiar they feel today. Even in the modern world, resources are discovered under conditions that appear ideal. Critical minerals essential to advanced technology, rare metals needed for renewable energy, strategic reserves located in politically stable regions, and still, many remain untouched. Not because they are unknown, not because they are inaccessible, but because the same forces apply. Regulation, cost, environmental limits, political priorities. Discovery triggers analysis, not action. Modern feasibility studies are more precise than ever and more cautious. Risk assessments dominate decision-making. Long-term liability outweighs short-term gain. As a result, many modern discoveries exist in a permanent state of readiness. Known, mapped, measured, and unused. Gold, more than a century ago, revealed this pattern early. It showed that value does not demand exploitation. It negotiates with systems. When those systems resist, even the most perfectly timed discovery can remain untouched. The lesson did not expire with the gold standard. It evolved. So what if the gold had been found at the perfect time? Not too early, not too late. At a moment when markets understood its value, when technology could reach it, when experience already existed. The answer is uncomfortable, but clear. It still would not have mattered, because gold does not operate outside the world that surrounds it. It does not command law. It does not override economics. It does not set political priorities. Gold has value, but only within systems willing to reorganize around it. In earlier centuries, those systems were flexible. They bent easily under pressure. They expanded aggressively in response to opportunity. By the time these discoveries occurred, the systems had hardened. Rules replaced improvisation. Calculation replaced instinct. Stability replaced expansion. Gold did not lose its worth. It lost its leverage. The world no longer needed to move for it. And that may be the most important shift of all. Many of history's forgotten gold discoveries did not fail because they were flawed. They failed because the conditions that once amplified gold no longer existed. Discovery alone could not force change. Timing alone could not guarantee relevance. Gold remained underground, not as a tragedy, not as a mystery, but as a reminder. A reminder that history is shaped not by what exists, but by what the world is prepared to act on. So the real question is not whether gold could have changed history if found at the perfect time. The real question is this: was gold ever truly shaping history on its own? Or was history simply using gold when it served a larger purpose?